Good morning. And it's good to see you. Good to be back in the house of the Lord today. I think I'm on, Nina. At least I think I am. Let's go with me this morning. We'll go back to Matthew. You know where we've been talking about the final week of Jesus now for some time. Things that he went through, things that he'd done, the price that he paid for you and I. Last week we talked about Jesus before the two high priests, and also about before the Sanhedrin. And we talked about that and how they said he was worthy of death. They lied on him and couldn't find witnesses that, even when they were lying, couldn't find witnesses that could agree and that type of thing. And I told you there was 3 different trials that they would perform on him at night, or 2 at night, 1 at daylight. And we talked about last week. And today we're going to talk about what happens after they convicted him of death. So what we're going to do, we're going to go to Matthew chapter 27. And the first thing we're going to do is we're going to look at what Judas did in the first 10 verses. Then we're going to go to Luke and spend some time in Luke with Jesus' first trial before Pilate, and then Herod, and then back to Pilate. I may read a little bit more today than normal. It's all in here. We'll just see how it goes and see what happens. But I'm having a hard time getting my throat cleared out this morning. But anyway, Matthew chapter 27 and verse 1, we'll begin reading. It says, when the morning was come, all the chief priests and elders of the people took counsel against Jesus to put him to death. Now, we went through that last week, how his trial, all that they went through. So, and somehow or another, during all this process of time, we don't know all the answers. I mean, there's lots of questions. I tell you all the time, I have more questions than I do answers about things. Somehow or another, during this time, though, Judas was aware of what was going on. Whether Judas, the Bible's not clear, whether Judas goes into the office of the high priest, I don't know. He had to at some point. I know that at some point. They would have knew who he was. I mean, he's been up there negotiating how much he was going to sell Jesus for, so he would have been in and out at some point. But this is what's happening. He has heard the conversation, and he knows Jesus now is going to be killed. I don't know what Judas was thinking. I don't know if he thought that Jesus was the Son of God. He just had enough power to come down here and just get out of all the troubles that Judas was putting him in. There's things that's just not clear. Don't know what to say. If he knew anything about Jesus at all, like in that aspect, he would have knew that Jesus had the power to call upon his Father and to send angels to this earth and do whatever was necessary to get Jesus out. But Jesus didn't come to get out of it. He come to die for my sins and your sins. He tells us that's why he come. Right. He didn't come for any other purpose. He come that he might be able to live just like you and I live, and face the things that you and I face in life and overcome them, death, hell, and the grave. That was his whole purpose of coming. But Judas wasn't aware of that. I don't believe it this time. Verse 2. And when they had bound him, they led him away and delivered him to Pontius Pilate, the governor. Now, the Jews did not have power to put somebody to death in their own power. So they're going to take him to Pilate. And they're going to make it sound like to Pilate it's not a religious thing, because Pilate didn't want anything to do with their religion. In other words, if they'd have just come to him and every accusation they had would have just been against something other he did in their religion, Pilate would have said, you take it, you do it. So they had to go beyond that. And they had to come up with other lies, the way they could put Jesus, when they put Jesus in front of Pilate, that Pilate would sentence him to death. Verse 3. We'll spend a few minutes right here, then we'll go to Pilate. Then Judas, which had betrayed him, when he saw that he was condemned. In other words, somehow or another, I don't know how, if he was there, I can't answer that. Somehow or another, Judas saw what was happening. And he was condemned. In other words, condemned means to already be sentenced, just waiting to die. I mean, more or less, that's what it means. You've already been sentenced. You're just waiting on it to be carried out. And so when he saw that he was condemned, he repented himself and bought again the 30 pieces of silver to the chief priest and the elders. Verse 4. Saying that I have sinned in that I have betrayed innocent blood. In this church, you can't undo what you do. It's so important when we make decisions every day in our life. And this year, I have made lots of them that I just weren't thinking clearly. And I'm sure I'm not the only person that's made decisions you're not thinking clearly. What decision you make today will affect you tomorrow. It will affect you next week, next month. It will. But we get caught up in a moment so much a lot of times, and it's just what we see right now, and that's all we see. We don't realize the damage that's being done. I mean, at this point, there was nothing literally Judas could have done. Now, he could have waited. He didn't have to do what he did. He could have waited. But outside of that, he couldn't have doubled the money and took it back. I mean, you just can't do it. What's been done is done. But he realized, he come to himself maybe in some point in way, and realized what he did. He'd sinned and betrayed innocent blood. And what did the religious leaders tell them? What is that to us? See thou to that. They don't care. The devil doesn't care what happens to you after it's all said and done. He don't care. Once he uses you like he did Judas, he was done with Judas. He didn't need Judas for something else. He needed Judas to do exactly what Judas done. And the devil in our lives places things in our lives sometimes. He just needs us to do the one thing that we do, the one thing we can't undo. He just wants us to do it. Once he's done with that, he's done with us. I mean, people commit suicide, every day. And I know a lot of times it's decisions, it's places they've gotten themselves in life, and they wake up one day and they're in a bad place. They don't know how to get out of it. And like you and I, we only feel our pain now. We can't see happiness down the road. We can't see that if you've ever been in that state. I mean, I've been there. You can't see it. You can't ever see having another better day. Only thing you can see is where you're at right now. It don't feel good, and you want out. And that's where Judas was at. He wanted out. There are ways out. I mean, I'm not telling you that Judas' situation would have changed that day, but if he hadn't hanged himself, we might have read something a lot different about Judas. Right. But he didn't give it time. I've told you over and over and over, and I'll tell it again just in case you're visiting. I don't think there was any difference in what Peter done and what Judas done. In my thinking, in my opinion, Peter denied him and said it 3 times and cursed and swore. You remember what was the last week before last? He cursed and swore. I mean, he wanted to think, those people to think that he knew nothing about Jesus. Didn't know who he was. Didn't know nothing. But Judas denied him, or betrayed him, rather. I'm sorry, for 30 pieces of silver, the cost of a slave on the market. Nothing, in all honesty. But the difference is Judas couldn't live with his past. And we're going to see in the text here in just a minute when he goes out and he hung himself. He killed himself instantly. But Peter waited. When Peter denied him, Peter waited. And when he heard about Jesus being alive, he ran just as hard as he could back to Jesus. That's the difference. Listen, you can't. Listen, maybe you've made decisions this week. Maybe there's things that you wish you hadn't done. I understand. People do it. It happens every day. Run back to Jesus. He is a forgiving God. We sincerely mean it from our heart, sincerely are sorry for our sin. I mean, listen, the way the text reads here, I'm not telling you that Judas weren't somewhat sorry for his sin, in a sense. At least had some type of remorse of some type. But he hung himself before he could do anything about it. He committed suicide before he could do anything to change the outcome of his life. The only thing we read nowadays, all these 2,000 years, is the bad things. It's better for that man he'd never been born, and just different stuff it says about Judas. I believe another place in Acts, maybe it says he purchased a field with reward of iniquity. Maybe in the book of Acts. But anyway, different statements that made, and all of them negative statements. But after Peter's denial, we don't read anything negative about Peter because Peter ran to Christ. That's the difference there. I mean, Christ is the difference in every situation. Now, I don't care what it is. Christ is the difference. Having Christ, knowing Him as Lord and Savior of your life. And Peter made mistakes and then on. Yeah, he somewhat argued with God over what to eat and what not to eat in a sense. But that's not bad. Just saying, he just told God, no, I can't do that. Nothing common or unclean. He'd done that, And then Peter and Paul had a little discussion over circumcision that they didn't agree on. But for the most part, all we read about Peter is good things that he done. I mean, does anybody, maybe I'm just me, does anybody ever think about what people going to think about you when you're gone? Am I the only one? I mean, really, I'm being honest with you. I don't know. I think, Miss Joy, a lot of times, what kind of legacy am I leaving? I mean, I think about it often. Maybe I shouldn't, but I do. You know, I said, well, I wish I'd have went on and done this and been known for this. Anybody ever done that? Or just me? Just me. You know, if I'd have just made this turn in my life, I could have been here and I could have been doing this. You know, that's just me. I'm just talking. But I don't think anybody, whether your legacy, you don't want to leave a legacy like Judas. I won't get into no details. But y'all have heard me tell about me being on drugs and wanting to kill myself. Y'all have heard me numerous times. But you know, I mean, God, first of all, don't misunderstand what I'm about to say. God, you know what would stop me from doing that? You know why I ran from the idea and fought it hard as I could? Jerry, because of what it would put my wife and my children through when I was gone. I mean, it's just what, and I couldn't see. However long it's been now, 13, 14 years, 15 years, whatever it's been. Think a minute, but whatever it's been, I couldn't see where I'm at today. Judas was in a place he couldn't see happiness. He couldn't see what was ahead of him. He couldn't see how trusting Christ was going to make all the difference, and he couldn't see that. He was blind to it. And listen, the devil's got, he can put the blinders on you. He's putting it on people every day. He's putting it on church people. I mean, not unless he's got the world. I mean, you got to worry about them. He's got them. But he's putting the blinders on you, on us. I mean, he's putting it on us, and people are just they're hunting the easy way out. But that's I wanted to. I didn't want to put my wife and my children through that, what they had to live with, and I didn't have grandchildren at the time. But I even thought about them. What would my sons or my daughter tell their children about their daddy? I mean, maybe I'm just talking crazy to some of y'all, but I've had many thoughts like that years back when I was going through all that. But Judas didn't think that far in advance. He only thought for the right then, the right now in his life. But let me tell you something, church. I mean, life is good. I'm thankful. God has blessed me beyond measures, and I mean that. But there's a better day coming. Yes. This ain't just it here. There is a better day coming. Trust him through whatever you're going through. I know life ain't easy, and I know it ain't fair, we say all the time, but that's just life. But let me tell you something, Christ makes a difference in all of it. Listen, you can face a lot of battles in your life. If he's on your side, or you don't, whichever, if he's with you and you're walking with him, you can, it's just amazing what you can fight and what you can get through with the Lord's help. But you got to trust in him. You got to do like Peter done. You don't do like Judas and take the matters in your own hand and try to handle it yourself, because you can't handle it yourself. But be like Peter and run as hard as you can to Christ. I know sometimes life might not change today when we go through problems. I understand today you can just be so burdened down and so this and that, whatever. But one day, you'd be surprised what God can do for you in just one day. One day. Not a month, not a year. I mean, you'd be surprised. Listen, he done something for me in this church in one day that I had looked for years. I had looked for 2 years. And right over here on this side of the altar over here, in just a matter of a few minutes or however long I was down there, don't even know. I got up different. I thought different when I got up from that. Everything, life was just different. I went home and I couldn't even, I go to bed early, had for years and years. I couldn't even go to bed. Laid up in the bed, way up in the middle of the night. And I remember that particular night going on, stories I started on, I won't never remember the words to it, but there was music beside the bed. I had no idea what was in it, and I pressed the button, and it was that song. It sure looks like it starts out in the verse, sure looks like a beautiful day, or something along that line. I won't never get the words of it out, but I turned that on and just sit there in the bed and just cried because God had done something for me in one day that I had been looking for 2 years. He is the difference, church. He is the difference. He'll make the difference in your life. But the thief cometh not but for to steal, to kill, and destroy. That's all the devil. He don't care how he destroys you. He don't care what he puts your family through, what they have to live with, the disaster that you leave behind. They don't care. The devil doesn't care about that. He just wants to destroy you. Trust Christ. Don't be like Judas. Don't be like Judas and just think you can handle it all, or you can hang yourself, or you can do this, or you can commit suicide, and it's all over, and that's the end of it. Because it's not the end of it. It might be the end, and it's not the end for you or the ones that leave behind. Because you're going to live somewhere other in heaven or hell after death, one or the other. You're going to live. But your family's got to live with what's left behind now. He can make the difference in your life if you just trust in Him. I can't tell what next verse. I can't tell what verse I'm on. I can't see it. Next verse. And he cast down the pieces of silver in the temple and departed and went and hanged himself. We pretty much covered that. Next verse. And the chief priest took the silver pieces and said, "It is not lawful to put them into the treasury because it is the price of blood." Boy, they were trying to make that, it's the Passover season, and they were all about trying to keep everything holy except what they done to Jesus. They were trying to keep everything up. They didn't want to do certain things. The file themselves where they couldn't participate in Passover, and they wouldn't even put the money in the treasury. They took it and bought a field, and that's prophesied in the Old Testament. Zechariah, I think, chapter 11, verses 12 and 13. It says Jeremiah in the text, and Jeremiah probably said it, or Jeremiah said it, and Zechariah recorded it. There's a bunch of scenarios to why that could be that, but it's in Zechariah chapter 11, verses 12 and 13. Next verse. And they took counsel and bought them the potter's field to bury strangers in. Keep going. Wherefore the field was called the field of blood unto this day. Next, then was fulfilled, which was spoken by Jeremiah the prophet, saying, "And they took the 30 pieces of silver, the price of him that was valued, whom they of the children of Israel did value." So Jeremiah could have spoken it, Zechariah recorded. There's other reasons that they could be in there. Everything we got ain't wrote in the Bible. Every word Jeremiah said ain't wrote down. Right. I mean, not every word, that we have. So don't let that worry you when you read something other that just ain't. I mean, listen, the Bible even plainly says that the years that Jesus was here, for everything he was written, the world couldn't contain the books. Now, I know he's not Jeremiah, but that tells you it take a lot of writing to cover everything. That's all I'm getting at from that point. Now, let's flip over to Luke chapter 23. That's Judas now, pretty much where Judas is at. I've covered him. Now, let's get on to Jesus before Pilate. I think it's 23:1. Luke 23:1. And I chose to go here because this is the first time Jesus stands before Pilate. And then we'll go back to 27. If we have time, we'll go back to 27 and see Jesus the second time before Pilate. But this is the first time when they first brought him. And the whole multitude of them arose and led him to Pilate. Verse 2. And they began to accuse him, saying, "We found this fellow perverting the nation and forbidding to give tribute to Caesar, saying that he himself is a king." Now, you remember what I said in the beginning. They couldn't bring things against him as far as their religious, like saying he said he was the Son of God. They couldn't do that because Pilate wouldn't have any dealings with them. It had to be a religious matter, and he weren't religious, and he would have cared less about it. So they went bigger than that. everybody had to worship and Caesar pretty much as a god. That's just the way the Roman Caesars were. So they brought, and this there, if the Jews got out of hand, and caused a rebellion against Rome, well, they would arrest them and crucify them or kill them or do something. And that's what we're going to see when we get to Barabbas. That's where Barabbas was at. Maybe we'll get there today. So they began to accuse him, saying, hey, we found this fellow perverting the nation. In other words, causing rebellion, causing an uproar, and forbidden to give tribute to Caesar. Now, remember what Jesus said when they asked him, did he pay tribute? And he sent Peter to the river, said, with a fishing hook, and said, the first fish you find, the first fish you catch, there'll be money in his mouth. Take it and pay the taxes for me and for you. So they had no leg to stand on, saying forbidden to give tribute. And that don't mean just money. That could mean, as in speaking against Caesar, saying that he himself is a king. Next verse, 3. And Pilate asked him, saying, art thou the king of the Jews? And he answered him and said, thou sayest it. Verse 4. Then said Pilate to the chief priests and to the people, I find no fault in this man. It's amazing how the religious community couldn't find nothing but fault. And everybody we're going to read about this morning, when he stands before the Roman government, they could find no fault in him. We'll get to it maybe, but at least 3 times, I think Pilate says he finds no fault in him. Remember that? I think it was three times. I find no fault in this man. Verse 5. And they were the more fierce, saying, he stirreth up the people, teaching throughout on Judea, and beginning from Galilee to this place. You know, they more fierce. I mean, they began to holler and scream out what is the picture in my mind. They holler and scream out. And he's causing problems. He's going to cause an uproar between the Jews and the Romans. Something that would get Pilate's attention. But when he found out that he was from Galilee, next verse, verse 6. When Pilate heard of Galilee, he asked whether the man were a Galilean. Now, all of them were except for Judas. Judas was Kerioth, maybe in southern Judea. Kerioth, I can't remember the exact word. Keriot, maybe. Anyway, he was from southern, but everybody else was. Verse 7. And as soon as he knew that he belonged to Herod's jurisdiction, he sent him to Herod, who himself was at Jerusalem at the time. Now, Herod was a title, not necessarily a name. There was different Herods throughout the Bible that we've seen. Well, Herod would have been over a province of parts of Israel, would have been over a part of it. Now, Pilate would have been over him, as far as Rome, over the whole area. But Herod was over this part. You remember when Jesus was born, there was a Herod that wanted to kill all the babies. The same group of people or family of people. Like I say, I think there might be 4 in the Bible. I don't remember. I didn't study that. I just don't remember. I could find out. I believe there was 4 different ones. Now, in my thinking, this would have probably been the same Herod that put John the Baptist to death just a few months back. We already talked that. It would have probably been the same one. And we'll see what kind of person he is here. Verse 8. When Herod saw Jesus, he was exceeding glad, for he was desirous to see him of a long season, because he had heard many things of him, and he had hoped to have seen some miracle done by him. And I believe that's sarcasm in a sense. I don't really believe he wanted to see him for that purpose. I'm sure that everybody knew who Jesus was at that time frame. I'm sure Herod knew who he was, had heard about him, and probably did want to see him. You remember that when Jesus come on the scene, they thought John the Baptist had raised from the dead. Well, Herod was the one that had said that. Said he thought so. So I don't think he wanted to see him because of seeing a miracle. I just think he wanted to see him to do what he did. Verse 9. Then he questioned him with many words, but he answered him nothing. Verse 10. So Herod began to ask Jesus questions. But the problem was that everywhere that Jesus went, the chief priests and the scribes followed him. They followed him to Pilate. They followed him to Herod. And the chief priests and the scribes stood and vehemently accused him. I mean, listen, they just hollering out. I couldn't imagine have so much animosity or hard feelings towards somebody. I would just follow them around. I just can't imagine that. I mean, maybe you can. I mean, they've probably been people, there's probably some people I like better than others. But I can't name a soul in my entire life, Brian, that I'd want to follow around and just holler out something bad about them. I mean, that just gets me. And not just one person, now the whole group done it. I mean, it'd be like this whole church after one person and just following them everywhere they went and just hollering out in the crowd in the midst of people how bad you thought they were. That's the only way to look at it. That's what they were doing. I mean, it almost be like, you following in a sense, it'd be like almost like you following the preacher everywhere, every group of people he went to, and you just holler out what you thought of him. I'm just trying to get it where you'll understand it. I mean, these are people just like you and me. And the chief priest and the scribe, they just vehement. They were just letting him hold it right and accusing him. Jesus, somebody they really could find no fault in whatsoever at all. I mean, you can see fault in most people around, most people, but not Jesus. I mean, there's not one thing they could bring bad against Jesus. But yet the whole group following him anyway. And there were 70 people on the Sanhedrin. It don't say how many is there, but I'm going to tell you that was could even been a good portion of those there. So we're not talking about just 2 or 3 people. We're talking about a lot of people that would have followed him doing that. Verse 11. And Herod, with the men of war, set him at naught and mocked him and arrayed him in a gorgeous, and that word gorgeous there means like a bright color, a real bright color, gorgeous robe, and sent him again to Pilate. So if Herod would have wanted to see Jesus because of some miracle, this or that, he wouldn't have mocked him. You don't want to see somebody because because I belong to Jesus, because you just want to see them, you want to meet them, you want to find out what, and then just turn around and mock them. I say again, I think it's more or less along the idea of sarcasm. I mean, they mocked him. And just made fun of him. I mean, just doing everything they could to insult him. I mean, I think, that does a lot to people. And I mean, how would you feel? Put yourself in it. That was you in a crowd of people. And people were walking around following you and calling you names. I know, we've probably all been there at some point when people's called us names. But, I mean, Jesus already knows he's been there. That's all the time to say he's been there. Yes. He knows what it's like when everybody talks about you. Because they've all talked about him like that. I can't prove it. But in my thinking, some of the same people right here that's crying all this now, 4 days ago was crying Hosanna. They were praising him 4 days ago, but now today, this day, they want him crucified. Now, you don't have to believe that. I can't prove it biblically, but I believe it. I believe it. That just shows you how they just that much changed in those few days. Verse 12. And the same day Pilate and Herod were made friends together, for before they were in enmity between themselves. In other words, they were made friends more or less over to what he did with Jesus. Although he didn't find no fault worthy of death in him, Herod says he didn't. But he still treated him like the Romans were going to treat him. Verse 13. And Pilate, when he had called together the chief priests and the rulers of the people, verse 14, said unto them, you have brought this man unto me as one that perverteth the people, and I, behold, having examined him, before you have found no fault in this man touching the things whereof ye accuse him. Pilate said, I can't find not one fault of anything you've accused him of. That's what that appeared. I can't find not one thing that you're saying you accused him of. I can't find it. Verse 15. No, nor yet Herod, for I send you to him, and lo, nothing worthy of death is done unto him. So that tells me even Herod mocked him, I understand. But he didn't find nothing worthy of death in him. Next verse. I will therefore chastise him and release him. In other words, he said, I'll just punish him and let him go. Verse 17. For of necessity he must release one unto them at the feast. So during this feast time, one person got set free. I mean, everything God does in the Bible, and somebody's going to know this because I've told you many times, Jesus was the son of the Father. Barabbas means son of a father. I mean, that just ain't there by coincidence. Barabbas means, if you look his name up, it means son of a father. In other words, I mean, it's like that. But if you know, Jesus is son of the Father. I've often thought, I never really thought much on that. Wonder what Barabbas would have thought like a week later when he found out the truth, when he found out about who Jesus. I mean, wonder what he did with his life. Nobody knows. That's not even recorded in history nowhere I know. But I've thought about it often. What would I do if that would have been my life and been changed like that? But they had to release one. Verse 18. And they cried out at once, saying, away with this man, and release unto us Barabbas. Now they knew Barabbas was a murderer, insurrectionist. In other words, he was causing rebellion in the nation. They knew who he was. They knew what he was. They didn't have to guess at it. I mean, they knew it without a shadow of a doubt that he was guilty and could find no fault in Jesus. But Darrell said, give us Barabbas. Talking about making wrong decisions. I mean, who really, would you want to turn the killer back loose in the church or in here? I mean, somebody just done that a week ago, or not say a week, 6 months ago, whatever. I mean, I realize maybe in time people can be rehabilitated. I ain't disputing that. But usually probably longer than a few weeks. You see what I mean? Just a few weeks ago he did this. I mean, it would have been since last Passover. And they said, no, just turn him loose. They already knew the problem he'd already caused. Or he wouldn't have been arrested by the Roman government. But away with this man, crucify him, away with him. Next verse, 19. Who for a certain sedition made in the city and for murder was cast into prison. Next verse. Pilate, therefore, willing to release Jesus, spake again to them, verse 21, but they cried, saying, crucify him, crucify him. One more, next verse. And he said unto them the third time, why, what evil hath he done? I have found no cause of death in him. I will therefore chastise him and let him go. Next verse. And they were instant with loud voices requiring that he might be crucified. And the voices of them, of the chief priests, prevailed. Now you don't have to, maybe you don't get this like I got, but that tells me they were hollering louder than everybody else. That's what I get out of that. They were hollering louder than anybody else. They were, whoever was for Jesus, the crowd that was against him was bigger than the crowd before. And that's what I get out of that text with the voices. The voices prevail. 24. And Pilate gave sentence that it should be as they required. They thought they were winning. They thought they had beaten Jesus, but that was the whole purpose of him coming. He done exactly what he come to do, to die for my sins and your sins. He was, the Bible don't, we know he was beaten, but the Bible don't tell us, a lot about his scourge. We know they planted a crown of thorns on his head, and the thorns over there, it's like a couple inches type thorns, and they planted them way down in his head. Many believe he was beaten with a cat of nine tails, which was a long whip with little strings that come off of it with glass or metal or whatever they could find woven in it. And in those days, the common punishment was 40 stripes save one, which was 39. And they would lay 39 stripes on him. If they'd done 40, there's different reasons for that. One is if they went over it and done 41, the guy doing the whipping could have been whipped himself. So they always say, and there's other reasons. I've heard other reasons for them too. But it don't matter what those reasons are, but it's the fact that he took a punishment by his stripes. The Bible tells us in the Old Testament we were healed, and in the New Testament by his stripes we were healed. It's all because of the price that he paid for you and I on Calvary. I mean, he took it all on, church. I don't care where you at. I don't care what you're going through. If it's the sin or sickness, he took it all on.
Yes, he did. Thank you.
For you and me. And this help we get in it like it comes from him. It ain't from what you do. It's because when we trust him, Lord, and listen, God still meets needs. He still, I mean, I believe he still heals people. I mean, I realize maybe everybody don't understand all that, but he still does miracles in people's lives because I've seen it. And you know, we ought to trust in him. We ought to trust in him regardless of what's going on in our life. We ought to trust because he is able. One day can make all the difference in the world. Day could be your day. Day could be your day that everything made different in your life. And listen, church, he paid a great price for you and I. Don't ever underestimate or take it lightly, the price he paid for you. I think for years of my life, at least me, I don't think I really understood. Not telling you I do now. But I understand a lot more now than I used to, the price that he paid me, what he really done for me on Calvary. I should have been the one that died on Calvary. You should have been the one that died on Calvary for your own sins. But he took the whipping for me. He took the punishment. He took the cross that I should have hung on. Anyway, I'm about out of time. Anybody got a question or comment? Yes, sir.
A lot of times we want to crucify our own more than we do the world.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's exactly right. Amen to that. Right.